Hello and welcome to this week's BizSmart Lunch and Learn webinar. Our weekly webinars are aimed to provide advice and share knowledge amongst business owners. And if you would like to keep up to date on our latest webinars, please make sure you follow us on SlideShare or subscribe to our YouTube channel. And you can also access all of our resources for business owners by downloading the BizSmart app. Our host joining me today is BizSmart Select member Zoe Thompson. But before we start the webinar, can I ask you all to use the question mark function on your screen and post any questions that you may have for Zoe, and she will answer them all at the end of the session. Thank you, Zoe. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Welcome to today's session. Risk management and risk has a very bad reputation as being incredibly dull, and I think that's very, very unfortunate. So my aim today is to take you through why you should be embracing risk and hopefully pointing you towards the joys of opportunity rather than threats. So without further ado, we'll have a quick look at what we're going to cover. One of the misconceptions is very much that risk management is all about large corporates, and it doesn't have that much relevance for small business. So we will try and cover that first of all. We'll have a little chat about risk, and then we'll look at perhaps how embracing risk can benefit small businesses, and look at finally, how do we turn that uncertainty into opportunity, and how do we leverage that for the benefit of business? So first of all then, risk management. So there is a small cartoon there that gives you a bit of an idea about what some people think risk management is all about. But the bottom line is everybody does risk management daily. I have young children, and so the joy of teaching them to cross the road. I know full well if I'm on a residential street, if I can't see a car for 100 metres and one just turns around the corner, the chances are I'm safe to cross the road. But my little one doesn't know that. So of course, if you can see any vehicle off in the distance, you've got to stand there and wait. So that's a really basic example of risk management. Insurance is all about risk management. You've got to decide how much insurance do you need, how much cover do you need. That might be specific, but then what level of response do you want to go with it? So that is about a risk management and a risk judgment. And obviously, large corporates love risk management. They've got thousands of people. They've got to make sure their processes are really tight. They've got to make sure that they've got strong governance that's in place. And this is where you have the sort of enterprise risk management frameworks. You're looking at strategic risk, operational risk. Have I got anybody left? Has everybody gone to sleep? But the thing is, you don't need that for small business. That's the really, really good news. It's all about keeping it simple. So first of all, let's have a look at what risk is so that we all know what we're talking about. So I have put a definition up there for you, and this is taken from the newly updated ISO standard, the 31000, the 31000. And it now changes the definition of risk. There's no more doom and gloom in there. There's no more just negativity. It's the effect of uncertainty on objectives. Okay, we'll have a look and see, well, what does that mean in English then? So in English, it's looking at either an internal or an external factor that might impact on your business. And by that, we mean your ability to deliver your service or product. So something for your customers, an impact to your customers. And this could be something internal, so it could be something that influences how you manage the company. So underneath there, we've got cost of employees. So if the new pension enrolment that came up, if you suddenly have to pay much higher national insurance contributions. So that's something you can't necessarily influence, but it's something that's there, and that could be an internal risk factor. It may be that if you are in a manufacturing sector, your cost of raw materials suddenly goes up. So look at what's happening over tariffs now across the globe. It may be that you've got steel, for example, or prices go through the roof, or if you're heavily reliant on fuel or heavily reliant on deliveries in terms of your sort of supply chain, you might be quite exposed to those cost fluctuations. So we've mentioned the supply chain. So again, what other interdependencies have you got? If you're one small cog in a large machine, so Jaguar Land Rover has now gone on to a 3-day week across over in the Midlands while they're making some changes to business. There are a lot of companies within Worcestershire who are in that supply chain to JLR. So that could be an external risk that's impacting on them. Intellectual property becomes all important these days. Who's got your intellectual property? How do you protect your intellectual property? Regulation and legislation is an interesting one. This is something which I'd like to put firmly in the opportunity bucket probably by the end of it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that any business goes around trying to risk manage legislation by avoiding compliance, but there is some scope in there certainly for opportunity. And finally, reputation. think definitely for small business, reputation is absolutely key. And I think it becomes more and more important. And some businesses maybe don't quite appreciate just how vulnerable they may be. So that's not all doom and gloom, but let's move on to have a look at why you should be embracing risk. Well, here's a cartoon of an ostrich, so I think we will understand exactly what that's saying. Risk management is not about ignoring what's going on. And actually, as Warren Buffett has said, risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. In terms of your business, if you don't understand what's happening in your business or how your business works or where the risks are in your business, then you're trying to manage your business blind. You're trying to manage those risks blind. It's far better to understand what may influence your business. So what are your biggest threats? What are your biggest risks? And effectively, if you say that a risk is that measure of uncertainty, so what's the likelihood that something might happen? And if it did, what would be the impact to your organisation? And as we said, it could be positive or negative. So in looking in that, you can create a risk profile, understand what would impact on your company. And it could be around your key staff. It could be to do with skills, your suppliers. It may be about process. Even small businesses can be very, very process driven in terms of efficiency or just in terms of if they're delivering a service for consistency. So core processes, you may have pivotal points or pinch points in your production, and they may be areas that you know there would be a very, very big impact. So you're going to have a look at your big threats and risks. Now, interestingly, you may then discover a whole load of risks that are going to give rise to unexpected costs. You might have something that the impact would be sort of extreme customer dissatisfaction. As we said, it could be that you're in danger of some form of legal non-compliance, and it may be that you're not going to hit your goals, your strategic goals for your company. And all of that is the sort of the negative side of risk, perhaps the sort of downside, what might be the doom and gloom. But there is good news. I promise there is good news. So we say as a company that risk and opportunity are very much two sides of the same coin. And this may be more so true for smaller businesses than large corporates. So if you're now listening to me thinking I'm talking complete nonsense and everything that I've just said sounds like threats to the business and you can't possibly understand how that could give rise to an opportunity, then maybe we will have a look at some more specifics. So in terms of opportunities then, there are great things that you can do as a small company. And this is very much looking at how, go back to that definition, it's the uncertainty on what you're trying to do and how do you turn that into a plus. So some opportunities then. Where are your biggest opportunities as a business in terms of risk? So as a small company, it could be that you feel overexposed in terms of things like cost of raw materials, but by the same token, you might also be able to have a quicker speed of response to a change in local market. So if you've got a very, very local client base and there's something new that comes up or there's some local event or event locally that's happening where you know that there's a new demand or a change, you've got the ability to be able to perhaps turn that around really, really quickly. So you can ultimately deliver that better service to your target market. If you understand the risk and you understand what may go wrong in your company, you've got a better chance of being able to put your resilience in place. So again, today there's been another news item about, I think it was Bristol Airport this time, where they've had a potential event where it could be that they've fallen victim to some form of ransomware. They haven't just coughed up the ransom, they've actually put a plan into place, and it's something that they've looked at beforehand. So it's not necessarily needing to be some great disaster recovery plan or something that sounds very, very sinister, but it's just understanding what do you need to have as a backup. What happens if one of your key staff is suddenly, unfortunately, away from work, perhaps recovering from maybe an accident or some form of illness? So how are you going to put things in place? And it means you can respond that much quicker. You may also have the opportunity to spot a gap in the market. And I know certainly that BizSmart are very keen to push differentiation for small companies and to look at how that can improve your offering and perhaps grow your business. But differentiation is really key. So this comes back to where we were talking about the positives around legislation and regulation. So again, at the moment, people are aware of the joy of personal data, the changes that have come in with GDPR, some of them not as significant as people perhaps have thought in terms of business. But there's a great opportunity to be able to prove to both customers and people in your supply chain that you're taking your data protection responsibilities seriously. Have you as a business had your Cyber Essentials certification awarded? If you have, you've got a great way to be able to show the Information Commissioner as well that you're actually taking good steps to be secure. And it may be that if you're then going to tender for a contract, or you're then going to engage with a potential new client, you've got that ability to have that independent due diligence and say, look, we're doing this, we've taken this opportunity to improve or to benchmark what we're doing. And again, your readiness to react. If you've preempted something that's going to happen, then it perhaps doesn't come as so much of a surprise. Of course, we can hope that certain changes may not come into being. But by the same token, if you're prepared, the military very much spends all of its time training for things that it hopes is ultimately never going to happen. But when it does, they've got a very, very agile and very, very responsive force that can put those plans into place. And finally, it's that aspect of the competitive edge. If you know exactly what's going on in your business and you know what you may be able to change or what you may be able to bring to bear to improve your offering, you can also use that competitive edge to your advantage. It could be that you can focus on a particular area where you can then deliver that much better service than perhaps a larger company can do. It may be that you can understand how to upskill perhaps members of your small team so that you've got that resilience. It could be that you can look at look to maybe having a number of different suppliers rather than having all your eggs in one basket, or being wholly reliant just on one particular customer or one particular stream. So the opportunities can be massive, and certainly the way that we work as a company is it's important to understand what may happen, and therefore what may go wrong or what may present a difficult challenge. But it's very, very important to understand how do you exploit the positives and the opportunities of change and uncertainty. So let's have a look at some top tips then. First of all, we'd absolutely advocate do not be scared of risk. We do it day in, day out. You have to do it for insurance. You're having to make judgments all the time. So understand your risks. Have a look at what the threats and the opportunities are within your business. And most definitely leap down to the bottom point in terms of why getting help is important. It may be that for a small business, you may be in business by yourself. There may only be a handful of you. You may think, I'm not sure I really know how to do that. But it may just be you can't see the wood for the trees. Sometimes having somebody external to your business to be able to help you can be absolutely invaluable in pointing something out that may seem obvious to them, but perhaps isn't to you. Clearly, Risk Evolves can help you with that. We've got a whole range of staff with a variety of different backgrounds. We've recently won an award as Pride of Warwick Awards as part of the No Jargon team because we speak in English. We don't come in and baffle people with clipboards and start talking about control measures and talking in risk speak. We come in and talk in plain language. But there's other options available as well. So BizSmart, a number of you will be BizSmart clients already, so you will have business advisors who can perhaps ask you pertinent questions, but also the peer-to-peer support. Who have you got who you can perhaps bounce off? So it may be something like Scale Up or through smart boards where you can have that discussion. But if you want to very seriously understand risk, then certainly having some expert people that can guide you through the process is particularly helpful. So the first thing you've got to do is try and understand what risks have you got within your business and where are they? And this comes back to that risk profile that we spoke about. So it will give you a really good understanding of where is there uncertainty. It may be that it's not very likely to happen, but if it did, that something manifests itself and comes to being, that it has an absolutely catastrophic impact on your business. So that would be something really, really key to focus on. And this is why we're saying focus on the biggest risk first. We've engaged with numerous clients to deliver different services, and certainly I'll go back to data protection because it's a relatively recent change for smaller businesses to get a handle on. There was a particular company that we were involved in who were very, very concerned about the fact that an individual who arrived in the building who signed in for health and safety reasons in terms of a fire register would be able to see the name and the company of an individual who perhaps had signed in ahead of them on the sheet. Now, on this particular occasion, there were no safeguarding issues, no other particular issues over knowing who had been or not been. So yes, okay, they could see some personal information, but what level of risk did that present to the company? How likely is it that somebody would complain to the Information Commissioner? It's not really very much of an issue. But on the other hand, as we then sat there and looked at some of the new assets and the processes and things that had changed within the company, they'd taken on new equipment. That was all linked via an office network and actually wasn't covered by their IT company in terms of their antivirus product. So the likelihood of having some form of cyber attack or that being an in to be able to sort of tackle the business that way for people with malintent was much, much bigger than the issue of being able to see the name of a professional individual that had signed into the building ahead of you. So sometimes we can focus on the latest risk that comes up as opposed to understanding what's really, really important to our business. So the next aspect is about reviewing risk regularly. Unfortunately, risk is not one of those things where you kind of complete your homework, do your project, and then you can sort of stuff it into the bottom of a drawer. It's very much something that the whole of your business team needs to be engaged in. People need to understand. They can also then be your tripwire and pick up on things that are changing. If you know there's a particular area of your business that might be very, very vulnerable, then anything that could impact on that, you know that your staff can then bring to your attention. So it's important that your risk documentation effectively remains live. And in doing that, it's not necessarily something you're going to look at daily, but have a look at it regularly. And don't forget to check what's changed internally in your business, as well as what might be going on externally across markets. So back to that last point then in terms of get help. So Risk Evolves is absolutely available to come in. We're more than happy to sit down and have a discussion with you to look at the sorts of things that we can provide. Yes, we can help people get certification. So if you are a bigger company and you need that sort of overarching support and you need very well documented processes, then of course that's great. But if you're very much just starting out on your risk journey and you feel that you need a little bit of hand-holding, perhaps a critical friend to come in to help you just sort out a risk profile and understand where your key risks are, or maybe you've done that step already and you're now worrying about how should you manage the risk, or how do you sort of set your risk appetite, then it would be very exciting to hear from you. So that is a really short, sharp canter through risk management, why it's not scary, how it can help business. And I just wonder, have we had any questions?
You have. Thank you very much, Zoe. Your first question come through already is from James, and he asks, does risk management have to be for a formal process and documented?
Okay, that's a very good question. Thank you, James. So as I was saying at the beginning, for larger companies, you can have a very formal process around risk management. You can establish sort of enterprise risk management frameworks, but by the same token, you don't have to. So risk management could be something that you've very informally done, where you've sort of sat down with a blank piece of paper or perhaps on a whiteboard, got heads together, sat and had a think, and you come up with some risks or some uncertainty that might impact on your business. Our suggestion would be, in terms of documenting, it would make sense to then record what they are. So whether you do that in a spreadsheet, or whether you just do that in a document, it doesn't necessarily have to be on a particular format. But if you understand what the risk is, maybe understand how likely is that to happen, and understand what would the impact be, you can sort of quickly put together almost like a bit of a matrix in terms of then working out, okay, well, which are your risks then that would have the biggest impact on your business. It's all really about understanding the impact. But again, there isn't really a perfect score around that. You can essentially just use your gut feel or your judgment. So at the small business level. And again, people externally might be able to give you a view in terms of how likely something might be to happen if it's an external factor to the business. But generally, the business itself are the people that make the decisions about what's your level of risk appetite that you think, well, I'm quite happy with that. It may be something that you then look at it and say, okay, well, I'm absolutely not happy about that. So then what can you do to reduce your exposure to that particular uncertainty? So we would say keep a record of what you've decided is your risk. And again, even if it's just you, even if you're a sole trader, it's very, very useful to have something that you've documented. So at some point in the future, periodically, whether something changes, whether it's on a quarterly basis, If you're in a fast moving sector, it might be on a monthly basis, but you can have a look and say, okay, does that still make sense? What do I think has changed? And what we do find is that people new to risk can be quite risk averse and think that something would be absolutely horrendous. And then over time, when you revisit it, you maybe then perhaps lessen you might take the view that you've perhaps been a bit harsh in your judgment and sort of bring that back down again.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Your next question is from Greg, but I think you may have covered most of that, so if there's anything you want to add. Okay. He asks, how often should risks be reviewed?
Right, okay. So again, I would say it could depend on the business or perhaps the sector. So as an absolute minimum, it may be sensible to look at it, to just have a quick look. What are the governance have you got that's in place? There are lots of aspects of business where it may be something that you only touch quarterly. So, for example, if you have to register with the Information Commissioner for data protection, you probably only do that annually. Cyber Essentials, the sort of formal certification is annually, but it may be that you're looking at things on a 6 monthly basis or on a quarterly basis, and that's just quite a good habit to get into. And again, it doesn't have to take hours and hours of time. It may be very straightforward to get out, have a look and say, right, what's changed? What are the factors that you listed down? Are you now doing something different? Have you stopped doing something as a business where it may then be that you can actually remove some things that you were doing and sort of save a bit of time or cost that way? So it's almost an unhelpful answer to say it depends. But again, it may be that if you identify some stuff that's very, very high risk, or where you're very, very exposed to sort of external factors, so looking at pricing and that kind of thing, it could be that there's certain things that you're reviewing in there on a monthly basis or a weekly basis rather than the whole lot.
Okay, thank you very much. You have one more question, this one from Ryan. How do you decide what the key risks are to a business?
Okay, so we would sort of suggest working through systematically, if that makes sense. So have a look and see what have you got in terms of people, have a look and see what you've got in terms of processes. So in terms of processes, they may be internal. So it might be how you're actually conducting your business. It could be that it also includes things like if you're delivering a product, what's your method of dispatching the product? How does it get to a customer? So looking at everything across your business in sort of different strands. So people can be an obvious one, the product can be an obvious one, things like delivery, sort of supply chains. And across that then, have a look at the different factors. So we talked about internal and external factors through the presentation. So it may be that it could be something that's reputational, it may be something that you're looking at costs, however you're mapping the uncertainty, but do it sort of internally, externally, across defined functions. Look at that sort of, right, well, how likely is that to happen? If it happened, how bad would it be for the company? And then you sort of come out with this kind of an impact score. I deliberately haven't put up an image of a matrix because it makes it look as if it's very, very formulaic or very, very prescribed. But essentially that's how we sort of handhold people through coming out with, if you like, a score. And it is very, very subjective, but coming out with a score, and then you can understand what are those big risks. And we would sort of say, okay, here's your risk profile. Then you can look at it and say, well, am I happy with that? Or do I think I want to reduce some of those risks? And then what can I do about it? And then we can look at measures to bring those risks down or control them.
Okay. Great, thank you very much. Some great questions there. If you do have any further questions, please do email Zoe direct. I will be sending out a copy of the presentation to you all, so you will have her contact details on there. But just before we close, just a quick reminder, if you would like to keep up to date on our latest webinars, please make sure you follow us on SlideShare or subscribe to our YouTube channel. And you can also access all of our resources for business owners by downloading our BizSmart app. Thank you again for hosting today's webinar, Zoe, and we hope everyone can join us again very soon.